Why is storytelling in demos most important? Why is this your thing?
I give it to you this simply. If I threw numbers or features or benefits at you, you're not going to remember it. And if you're my champion, you're not going to tell it to the rest of your team the way I want you to tell it. But if I tell a great story, it's something humans have been doing since the dawn of humanity, you're more likely to tell that story the same way to exactly who I want you to tell it. Ergo, it's kind of like having me in there telling the story to other stakeholders in your organization.
I love that. And I think at Sandler, we talk a lot about selling to pain and how do we really connect emotionally with our buyers, right? That people make decisions intellectually, but they buy emotionally. They want to get connected to it and stuff. And I've kind of found that the best way to get credibility with your buyer is to connect with them and tell their story better than they can tell it themselves. Like if you can really tell their story, that's what they want to talk about, right? Those are the problems they want to solve. That's the story they're most invested in. Even when you're telling a third party story about somebody else's, life, career, similar circumstance, it's helpful, but not as quite as powerful as when you're telling theirs. Can you talk a little bit about your attitude around storytelling and how you maybe craft a good story or anything?
Absolutely. I think what's really important is that, and I see this every day. I don't see this sometimes. I see it every day. We still talk like we're the hero of the story. It's about our product, our feature, our benefit, our tech, our solution. The buyer doesn't care about that. What the buyer cares about is their pain point and the solution that we're actually trying to solve. So you have to make them the hero of the story, the hero of the journey. And when you tell a really good story, Mike, what you're actually doing is pulling someone from the other side, from the audience, and pulling them onto the stage next to you. And if they can visualize themselves using your product because they're standing next to you, they're more likely to, one, get excited. And if they're more excited about it, they're more likely to pull in other stakeholders. And if you do that, you're going to get better deal velocity throughout the entire sales cycle.
Again, going back to the attitude part, where do you think the common misconceptions are when people try to tell stories? Where do they mess it up? Where do most salespeople go wrong?
So other than what I just talked about, making your prospect the hero of the story, I think what we do very often, and at Demo Stack, we're a pre-sales solution. We help you democratize demos. So anyone can do a demo in your organization, but we still deal with a lot of pre-sellers. And I find that when it comes to, sales engineers or people with that kind of tactical mind, they speak very technically. And the person on the other end might not be a technical person. So we get lost in kind of our jargon and our words, but does it actually relate? So I think the best way to think about it, to take a step back, is think about using vivid imagery and actually painting the picture of what's happening. What color is that? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Things you don't normally associate those with. But if you can think about those things that way, you're more likely to take your prospect's pain point and lay out a really vivid image of their problem.
Do you have any storytelling tips or tricks or hacks?
Absolutely. So much of telling a great story is just having an engaged audience. So storytelling is the very high level, 30,000 foot view, if you will, of that. But when I realized, so here's what happened. My first client that I had doing demos was a fintech company. And so it was a little bit, proper and I'll say stuffy. And I got onto my first demo and everyone on their side had their cameras off. And I'm like, what's happening here? Like, how is that possible? How am I going to gauge their engagement? Because when I was selling on a cruise ship, I was on a stage with 500 people. If I couldn't read that body language, I was dead in the water. Right. I had to know that they were reacting to what I was saying when I wanted them to react. So I think body language and how you speak. So here's two great tips. First of all, body language is critical. And as you can see, I'm using body language right now. I'm constantly moving. I'm a big hand talker. So I always tell people, if you're a hand talker, that's great because it's great at accenting points. But tie your elbows to your body. You also have
to lift that microphone out of the way. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook right now,
exactly.
You can tell. You got to get those out of the way. You don't want cords and microphones to knock over in front of you.
But watching, sorry, real quick, I'm going to say you want to know your demo, like your national anthem, up, down, left, right. You want to be able to click and know where that click spot is without looking at it. Because I want to be constantly looking at my audience to make sure I'm getting their cameras on, and watch them when you have them engaged. They'll go from camera off to camera on. So body language is really key. The other, when it comes to demo, or this also applies to cold calling or any kind of interaction that a seller is going to have, is tempo, pacing, and when to pause. And the reason that's so important, I love the neuroscience of it. Mike, have you shopped for a new car in the last year by chance?
I have not. No, I've had I like the paid off car. You know what I mean?
Fair enough. But you remember when you first bought that paid off car and you were shopping for it, and you suddenly saw that car everywhere?
Oh yeah, right.
But if you ask people that, they're like, oh yeah, it happens all the time. I'm shopping for a Tesla. I see a Tesla everywhere. The reason is that our conscious mind is so overloaded with information. We tell our subconscious mind what's important and what to look out for. So now when we're talking about that Tesla every day, we see it every day. The same thing happens when you're speaking. The reality is 9 out of 10 people are going to talk in the same tone throughout. And the problem with that is what you're telling the other person's subconscious mind is that this is not important because it sounds like everything else. But if you play with pace, so sometimes I'll purposely talk a little faster, and then sometimes I'll talk so slow it feels a little bit uncomfortable. But what I'm doing is a pattern interrupt. And now I'm telling their subconscious mind, you don't hear tone and pace and tempo like this very often. This must be important. I better pay attention. And that is it works for selling. It works for content. Frankly, it works for conversations with your partner back home if you're trying to convince them to have the same thing for dinner that you actually want. So I think that's a really important tip, is varying your tone, varying your pace, and you'll know that you're doing a good job with it when it feels so slow or so fast that it feels uncomfortable. So tempo, pace.
I love that demo at Sandler. We call that negative reverse selling. It's doing the opposite of what your prospects expect. And it could be a lot of different things. I loved your examples there, but a lot of times it's counterintuitive. Salespeople think that to get somebody else excited, we need to be more excited and we need to be more animated and talk faster and louder. But sometimes when you slow down and you get quiet and you go, Nick, that's interesting. You know, you're really making me think here. It makes them lean in to the conversation and join in more than trying to push back or hide from that hyperbole that is coming from a typical salesperson.